nation. Not just for the people around us, but for our home country too. Did you complete your hero mission last week? We're supposed to keep praying for Malaysia. Hope you remember to pray for Malaysia every chance you get. Let's do a quick recap of our memory verse.
Hello everyone! Our memory verse for today is Ephesians chapter 6 verse 7. Ephesians chapter 6 verse 7. Do your work and be happy to do it. Work as if you were serving the Lord, not as if you were serving only men. Come on, let's try it together, shall we? That's great! Ephesians chapter 6 verse 7. Do your work and be happy to do it. Work as if you were serving the Lord, not as if you were serving only men. Well done, friends! Remember to practice. See you!
All I wanna do is praise your name, from the rising of the sun to the going down of the same. You are my God, and all I wanna do is praise your name. I praise your name, we lift our voices and proclaim. You are my God, and all I wanna do is praise your name. All I wanna do is praise your name, from the rising of the sun to the going down of the same. You are my God, and all I wanna do is praise your name. I praise your name, we lift our voices and proclaim. You are my God, and all I wanna do is praise your name. Whoa, 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 whoa. All I wanna do is praise your name. Whoa, 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 praise your name. Whoa, whoa. All I wanna do is praise your name. You are holy. You are my God. You are righteous. You are my God. I want everything I do to bring you glory. You are my God. You are full of grace and mercy. You are my God. And I will ever praise you. All I wanna do is praise your name, from the rising of the sun to the going down of the same. You are my God, and all I wanna do is praise your name. I praise your name, and lift our voices and proclaim. You are my God, and all I wanna do is praise your name. You are faithful. You are my God. You are sovereign. You are my God. Every good thing it comes from you, Lord. You are my God. No one can compare to you. You are my God. I will ever praise you. All I wanna do is praise your name, from the rising of the sun to the going down of the same. You are my God, and all I wanna do is praise your name. I praise your name, and lift our voices and proclaim. You are my God, and all I wanna do is praise your name. Whoa, 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 whoa. All I wanna do is praise your name. Whoa, yeah, whoa, whoa, praise your name. Whoa, whoa. All I wanna do is praise your name. When you give me much, I will praise you. When you take away, I will praise your name. With my last breath, I will praise you. For all eternity, I will praise your name. Praise your name. Praise your name. All I wanna do is praise your name, from the rising of the sun to the going down of the same. You are my God, and all I wanna do is praise your name. I praise your name, and lift our voices and proclaim. You are my God, and all I wanna do is praise your name. Whoa,
When I say the name Jesus, what do you think of? King of Kings, Savior, Master, Lord of Lords, Son of God, Light of the world, Creator, Messiah, Emmanuel. Wow, these are all such powerful names. Jesus is someone so powerful. But why do you think he entered Jerusalem riding on a donkey? I mean, if he was everything you said he is, he could have entered on the fastest jet plane, or during those times on a white horse. That would have been pretty impressive, right? But that tells us something about Jesus. To have all the strength and power, but yet he was so gentle, controlled, and humble. The best specific word to describe it would be meek. And that's what we'll learn from our hero of faith today, King David. Let's watch.
God's story, David and Saul. So part of God's story is about two guys named David and Saul, and it begins like this. You may have heard of David before, the little shepherd boy who stood up to the massive warrior Goliath and won. But that isn't the whole story. In fact, that's really only a part of it. The rest of the story starts with a man named Saul. See, God wasn't very happy with Saul, Israel's first king. The people of Israel had begged God's prophet Samuel to give them a king so they could be more like other nations. God warned the Israelites they would regret it, but gave them Saul as their king. And like anyone, King Saul wasn't perfect and soon started to mess up, disobeying God and leading Israel away from him. And that's where our friend David comes in. God wanted a new king to replace Saul, so he sent Samuel to a man named Jesse. Jesse showed Samuel his eldest sons, big and strong men. Samuel thought for sure that one of these impressive boys was to be king, but God had other plans. God told Samuel to find another son, so Jesse brought in little David. Even though David was a little scrawny and had the smelly job of taking care of sheep, God told Samuel to look at more than his appearance. Samuel obeyed and anointed David, God's special way of choosing people. When David was anointed, the good spirit that had been helping Saul rule left him and was replaced with a new spirit that wouldn't leave him alone. Imagine there was a bee buzzing around in your brain that you couldn't do a thing about. That may be what it was like for Saul. Since Saul was going a little crazy, his servants had David, a great harp player, come to the palace and play music to calm the king. Now, one day, David came to bring his brothers, who were working as soldiers, some lunch. What started out as a lunch delivery soon turned into one of the most famous stories in the Bible, where tiny David took down the massive warrior Goliath with a single stone. After this, David was like a famous rock star. In fact, David was so popular that Saul worried people would start thinking David should be king instead. Saul began to try and kill him, sending him on dangerous quests where any normal guy would have died, and even threw a spear at his head once. Eventually, things got so bad that Jonathan, Saul's son, who David had become great friends with, helped David escape. David wandered for years trying to stay out of Saul's grasp. Twice, Saul even got so close that David had the opportunity to kill him. But David refused to kill the king in charge. David continued to flee from Saul for years, and without God's blessing, Saul's army was losing to the Philistines. Soon enough, Saul's army had been defeated. Jonathan had died, and the Philistines were now chasing them. Saul was so afraid of capture that he chose to fall on his own sword instead of letting the Philistines catch him. When David heard of Jonathan and Saul's death, he went out and avenged them. And with Saul dead, David returned to Israel and at last took his place as God's new king. And that's the story of David and Saul. So, in case you missed it, here's the quick version. God made Saul king. Saul disobeyed God. God said he would take the kingdom away from Saul and chose David. David became popular. Saul became fearful of David. David had to run away. David wandered for years. Saul died. David avenged Saul. David took over as Israel's chosen king. And that's a part of God's story.
Let's recap a little of the story we just learned. David's most told story is about David and Goliath. God wanted a new king to replace Saul, and God chose David. So how was David meek? Firstly, what is the definition of meek? What does meek mean? Meek is someone who is humbly patient, gentle and kind. Here are some lessons of meekness. That is what we can learn from David. Firstly, he was contented being a shepherd boy. Although his brothers were warriors, David carried food serving his brothers at the battlefield with no bitterness at all. Even though Prophet Samuel had anointed David to be king over Israel, he didn't mind going to play the harp for King Saul when he was asked to. God was David's joy and the person he looked for support and confidence. More than just being humbly patient, David was controlled. He chose to submit and serve with a good attitude even when he could easily choose to do otherwise. And that is what a real hero of faith is. Someone who trusts God will look after them and serve with humble patience by choice. Few missionary names are as well known as David Livingstone. He was a missionary, hero of faith who gave his life to Africa. A passionate explorer, he traveled into many parts of Africa, studying the areas, thinking of ways to help the African people modernize, and how he could share God's love to them. His meekness and humility assured the fierce African chiefs he was not a threat to them. Let's find out more.
David Livingstone was born on March 19, 1813, near Glasgow in Scotland. His parents were poor. He had to work in a cotton mill when he was only 10 years old. As a young man, Livingstone decided to become a medical missionary. That means that he worked hard as a doctor while spreading Christian beliefs. He completed his training and was sent to South America. He arrived in Cape Town in 1841. He traveled to Lake Ngami, Luanda, and along the Zambezi River, and into the deepest part of Africa, sharing Jesus' love. In fact, he traveled so deeply for so long, no one had heard from him for 6 whole years. Search party was sent to find him. He was finally found in Lake Tanganyika and was greeted with the now famous words, "Dr. Livingstone, I presume?" At the end of his life, he was very ill, but Dr. Livingstone refused to leave Africa. He died in May 1873 in Chitatombo, now known as Zambia, and left his heart in African soil. This hero of faith and his work continues on and is unforgettable.
Both King David and David Livingstone are such great heroes of faith. Their meekness and humility made them stand out and became even more respected. Kids, do you know that the strength in meekness can outweigh any worldly or physical strength a person might have? To be quiet and not react, it's a great show of strength in meekness. Remember this the next time you guys feel angry or irritated. Let's recap our memory words this week. Let's go, Ian!
Hi friends! Do you remember the memory verse I shared last week? Have you been practicing Ephesians 6 verse 7? This time I'm going to have a little fun. I'm going to remove some of the words. Ready? Let's try this. Ephesians 6 verse 7. Your work and me to do it as if you were not as if you were only. Did you manage to fill in the blanks? Come on, let's do it together. Ephesians 6 verse 7. Your word and deed to do it as if you were not as if you were only. Yay! We did it! Remember to keep practicing.
Kids, it is now time for the hero mission. Remember that you can be a hero of faith too. This week, David the Meek taught us that we can trust that God will look after us and that we can serve with humble patience by choice. Are you ready for your mission? Kids, your hero mission this week is when you have every right to complain or feel angry this week, choose to respond in meekness and grace instead. I can't wait to hear of your good reports next week.
Our hero of faith this week is David the Meek. Keep watching every week as we reveal all 12 of our heroes of faith. Remember that you can be one too! Hey kids! Remember to register for Kidz Church Zoom Hangout every Saturday at 2 p.m. or 4 p.m. for kids 7 to 12 years old and Zoom Playdate every Sunday at 4 p.m. for kids 6 and below. We have activity sheets for every age group on our website. Make sure to check them out. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel, and remember to follow us on GTPJ Kids on Instagram. See you next week. Bye!